This week on the Storycraft Society, we are finishing our 3D crafted map. Let's get after it. Happy Thursday, Storycraft family, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Garmin. This, of course, is the Storycraft Society, and we have a lot to do this week. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been working on our 3D crafted map. It's gone from being just a blank frame to this, and this week we are finishing it up. We have so many awesome things to do this week, like putting in the water effects. We're gonna be finishing up the nameplates. We're gonna be doing the forests and putting all of the roads on this thing. That's a lot of stuff to get done, so I'm not gonna do a heck of a ton of jibber jabbering. I will say, if you wanna support the channel, we have merch. That's gonna all be linked in the description below, and of course, if you like this video, definitely leave me a like. With all that said, let's dive into it. So right now we're gonna start with the roads. So the way we start those is with a micron pen. This is something that you could get from Michael's or any craft store, and it's just a really nice way of writing on acrylic paint. I don't understand the science of it, but it is really, really useful. The way that we're gonna start is by taking this pen and dotting out our roads. We know that there is a road that runs along this coast here called the Coast Walk, and it gets dotted out like this. So what I'm gonna do is it's gonna leave Marndance, just dropping the little dots in there as we go. So what this does is it gives me a visual representation without totally screwing up my paint job if I mess up. So that's step one. Now step two is pulling out our black acrylic craft paint. I'm gonna drop it in here. I'm gonna take a flat bristled brush like this, and I'm going to dip that in the paint. Take a paper towel and wipe it off. And then now what I'm gonna do is take my brush and straight up and down, I'm gonna stipple along this road. With something like this, less is almost always more. Now you're gonna pull out a finer tipped brush and go to your first road color. For me, it's gonna be this apple barrel khaki. And now you're gonna do the same exact thing, except with your thinner brush. Lastly, you're gonna pull out an antique white, and then that's gonna be your highest highlight. So you're gonna try and do that right down the center of your road. So with that all done, now I need to knock it out on the rest of the map, and we'll take a look at what that looks like when it's done. All right, so to start on our forests, we're gonna need a couple of things. We're gonna need a cup. We're going to need PVA glue. Now I like to use both Elmer's regular glue and watered down Elmer's glue. And then we're gonna also need some different colors of flocks. Now you certainly could do this with just one color, but I like 3 different types. I like a regular green, kind of a dark green crumble, and then a brown crumble. That gives your forests a little bit of depth and color difference that really makes them pop, I think. Once you have all your materials out, the next thing we need to do is get this mixed up. So I'm gonna set this back here. I'm gonna pull out the cup, and I'm gonna start putting our flocks in. So I'm gonna start with the green, put a little bit in there. Then I'm gonna move on to my dark green crumbles. And then lastly, I'll do my brown crumbles. Now I'm gonna put less of the brown crumbles in than I put of the dark green, because the brown will just look kind of like dead trees and that sort of thing. So then the next thing that you wanna do is take it and make sure that you stir it up well. Then once you got it all mixed, take and fill the cup up with both regular Elmer's glue and the watered down stuff. Now I like the watered down stuff because it soaks into the foam flocks a little better. And obviously I like the concentrated PVA glue because it really dries nice and hard and you don't have to worry about it flaking off or anything like that. So it's kind of a good combination to mix the two, at least for me. Another thing worth mentioning is that there really isn't a formula for this. It's just you want to put enough glue in that it makes a good paste, but you don't want to put so much in that it's liquidy or too much glue. And the way that you can learn that is just by messing with it. And I would say starting with not enough glue is better than starting with too much glue, because you can always add more, you can't take it away. So once I have that all put together, then I'm going to start stirring it up and mixing this into a paste. So now let's move down to the map. So with my forest paste all made up, the next thing I need to do is look at my reference material or decide where I want forest to go. So I know that I've got a big patch of forest here. That's gonna run all down there. So I'm gonna start with that. So all you need to do is just take and get little bits of forest and just drop them in place and then just pat them down into the surface. Now, you have to work with it a little bit and make sure that you get it spread out and then wait for the glue to tack up and stick. And then when you get done with that area, you just move on to the next area. Don't be afraid to go up onto your mountains, because obviously there are plenty of forests on mountains. As I'm working on this area, I'm gonna get this all finished and get all this on. So now that all of our forests are placed, I kind of have two things that I just want to wrap up with this while these are drying. The first thing is, remember, when you're placing a section of forest like this, it's not every single tree in your region. At least I wouldn't think so when you're zoomed out this far. It would be that these are big major patches of forest, and I think you can overdo this very quickly. Place them where you think you need to have them, but don't overdo it that you think that you got to put every single little teeny tiny patch of forest. So that's first. The second thing is, don't be afraid to cover your roads and your waterways. Don't think that just because the road came up through here, I had to leave a path for the road. Cover it up. Your players will get it. The road goes right here, and then it continues up there, and then it continues up there. So, with that said, the next thing we have to do is start working on our nameplates to get them ready. So it's convenient while the forests are drying, we'll work on the nameplates. Let's go. So working on the nameplates, I did a couple of things. I'm gonna break them down into the steps that I took. That's just because it's easy for me to categorize them that way. So the first thing that I did was I made the names and the icons. Now, I changed the font from episode 2, I think it was, in this particular series, and I did that for two reasons. The first one is I didn't like the look of the font that I chose for the little nameplates on my big South Central Tresina nameplate. The second is it's a bolder font, so it just makes my names jump out a little bit more from the map. So that was a simple change. The next thing I had to do was draw my icons. Now these are really simple. I just kind of came up with some iconography in my head that I thought looked very villagey, and then I thought of one that looked a little bit more city heavy, and I just sketched those out on paper. Once I had them sketched out, then I inked them, and then I took a photo of them, dropped them into my favorite photo editor, dropped a little bit of color in there to make it a little more spicy and pop off the page a little bit, and then I printed them out along with my nameplates. So the next thing I did was step 2, which is I needed to stain the wood that I had. So this was really simple. I pulled out some contrast paint, I used the Skeleton Horde color, and I just put that all over all of my pieces of wood. Now this step is a little unnecessary because it's unlikely that any of the wood is going to show up visually because the paper is going to cover the whole nameplate. What I like to do is just stain them a nice blonde wood color. That way, if for some reason the nameplates don't cover up all the wood, I still have something pretty underneath. Moving on to step 3, I needed to glue my papers onto the actual pieces of wood. So what I chose to use was a glue stick. The main reason I chose to use a glue stick here is because the glue stick won't cause the paper to saturate with water and warp up. Anytime you need a quick job like that that's on a small surface, Glue sticks don't work well for big surfaces, but anytime it's a small surface, you can use a glue stick, and it's a lot faster and simpler to use than using PVA glue or tacky glue or something like that. So then for step 4, I had to wait for the papers to dry, but glue sticks dry really fast, like 2 to 5 minutes, I think is what it says. I like to give them 10 minutes just to be safe, but then I just took my craft knife and I cut all of the edges down to size, so now I have these really nice, clean looking nameplates. I do the exact same thing for the icons for the cities and then the capital, and then the only thing left to do with the nameplates is to glue them onto the board. I use some hot glue and I just pile it up down in the holes and then set the pieces down in so they get a nice, good, solid bond. Such an easy step, but it really brings, all the details of the map out. And like I said, the nameplates really make it feel mappy. We're still waiting on those trees to dry. Flocking glue takes just an abysmal amount of time to dry, but as soon as they do, then we're gonna move on to the next step, which is getting the rivers and waterways done. I'm really excited about this one. So, the last thing that we need to do is get our water done. And the water on a piece like this is not a huge difference, it's definitely a subtle difference, but it's the type of subtle difference that just makes the whole piece. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna be starting out with UV resin. Now this is just cheap UV resin that I got on Amazon. Nothing to write home about, nothing special about it other than it cures with a UV flashlight. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna slowly pour it out into the river, the lake, the whatever, and then use a toothpick to just kind of slowly pull up and into all of the corners. Now the important part here is do not rush this. If you rush it, you'll get it all over your banks. It's gonna look like a sloppy mess. Honestly, I'm the last one to talk because I always end up rushing this step and I always end up kicking myself afterwards like, dude, chill out. Go a little slower, it'll look better. But I digress. Once I had that all pulled around, then I filled into my ocean. And this is the biggest pour that I'm gonna be doing. I'm making sure to go nice and thin here, so I try to avoid any kind of air bubbles and that sort of thing. It happens, the air bubbles will happen. And the good news is I'm gonna be doing something later to mask that. For right now, you just wanna go for a nice, smooth pour, use your toothpick to push it up into the corners, and then torch that so that it dries. Now I go over my ocean a couple of extra times with the flashlight because I wanna make sure that it's nice and dry. This is one of those things where you take the extra time, you'll avoid a huge mishap later. But once I had it good and solid, I checked with a toothpick and kind of tapped on it to make sure that I got it everywhere. It was now time to do water effects. Longtime fans of the channel know that Lexol is my water effect of choice. It's just an elastic sealant that I can get at Lowe's here in the US. But I take that and I put it out in little bits all over any water that I want to be choppy. Now there's a couple of things that I want to say here. The first one is the waves that this creates is going to be way out of scale. From this far back of a distance, you would never see any waves, so it's kind of unnecessary to do, but what I think it adds is depth to the water. The water doesn't look like a clean, flat sheet. It still has a little bit of choppiness to it. And again, this is supposed to be a depiction of an area, not a photo of it. So I like the idea that the water looks really choppy in the ocean. Now for my rivers and my lakes, one mistake that I made here is I actually put Lexol on my lake. I probably shouldn't have, because a lake, I like the idea that it would be nice and serene and flat. But what you can use the Lexol for, or any water effect for that matter, in the rivers is to create choppier sections. So any place where the topography really drops down, I'm gonna add a little bit of this. Any place where I think that the river is gaining a lot of speed, I will add a little bit of this. And what that does is it gives my rivers a little bit of visual difference. Up where it's smaller and thinner, it's a little smoother and easier. But then as it, meets up with another river in a riverhead, then that's a place where it might be a little bit more choppy, or coming down out of the mountains. It could be choppy there too. So with that said, I need to let my Lexol dry. That's gonna take forever. Lexol takes like 48 hours to get to the point that it's touchable, and then it takes like a whole week to get to the point that it's totally dry. Honestly, that amount of dry time should tell you how much I like Lexol as a product for the final result. But nothing else to do but look at some glamour shots, and then I'll catch you at the outro. So how many weeks later, and here we are wrapping up this project. I said it before and I'll say it again. Building the Tresina map, the full continental one that I have on my wall, is one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had crafting. It's the closest thing that I've ever made that I felt is more akin to art than it is to just a piece of terrain for a Dungeons and Dragons game. And this is one of those projects where I feel like I can't say it enough. Try this. This is not a video series that I made because I want people to watch me make something. I don't want people to look at my project and say, wow, that's really nice. This is a video that I made because I want all of you dungeon masters out there to realize that this is a way that you can make a map. It can be a little map, it can be a big map, it can be anything that you want. And I promise, if you put the time into it, you will leave with a piece that you will be so beyond proud of. And it's easy to do. Like that's the other thing. There's no step in this process that I'm like, dang, this takes a lot of frustrating time, or it's not like laying 10,000 shingles, which we've all been there. We've all done it. You know, it's way more fun than that. So I really, really hope that all of you out there will try. And if you do, please send me photos of the during process, the after process. We have the socials linked down below. Also, the Gmail is also linked down below. I want to see what y'all are doing. So please, if you make an attempt at this, definitely send it my way. I will be excited to tell you what I think. But with that said, that's all I've got for this series. If you liked this video or any of the videos from this series, please leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Share this series with a friend. I think that that is the way that you can help a small YouTube channel. Show this video to somebody, a dungeon master or another D&D player that you think would really enjoy this or would like to make one themselves. But with all that said, I've got nothing else to say. Until next week, I'll be seeing you. Up. I forgot to say this last week. I don't know if I said it earlier in this video or not. I probably did, but we have merch. The stores are down below. If you want to support the channel, you can buy one. That would be awesome. Thank you.